this planning spreadsheet for Taj Mahal, obviously since there's high elasticity for Taj like usual, I kept the changes, I kept them very minimal. I didn't do barely anything, but I changed the end of the year, the final 3 months. I lowered the price a little bit so I could get ending inventory down and also at the same time increasing EBT since it increased demand. And I think I lowered it by $1. Yeah, $1 in October, 50 cents in November, and $1 again in December. And then I moved on with that while also changing the production. I think I lowered the production at the end of the year, the beginning of the year. Kept it kind of like around 4,000, 3,000. Yeah. But at the beginning of the year, I lowered the production a lot. And then for the Munich beer, which I believe is a German beer, from the city of Munich, but I kept that one the same. I didn't touch none of this. It's a new beer. None of us know what the demand will be. And then moving on to Alley Cat. Alley Cat, I raised the prices gradually. I raised the prices the first half of the year to cause that usual steep drop, that little drop in the midsummer to keep the production, the inventory around 2,000 per month. And then that increased DBT, obviously, since it's a summer beer. And did I lower the prices for the? And yeah, I did also for this one too. The October, November, December, I lowered the prices by a little bit, by 50 cents per product, and that obviously increased demand and helped with ending ABT. But then Edgar had a slight increase in the beginning of the year, which then I dropped the final 3 months again. Both of these actions had a positive impact on EBT. Edgar, yeah, one, two, three, four. Yeah, the first half of the year I raised it by $1, and then the end of the year I lowered it by 50 cents. October, November, December. And that always had a positive impact on EBT. And I ended with, I believe, what was my EBT on this one? 324, 426. So that was all right. And then obviously for the simulation, I'll be watching the work center queue like usual this time, like we talked about in our presentation, keeping a better tracking on the inventory graph, especially that April to May month when we add a new fermenter.
All right, and then I'll come up next here to talk about my spreadsheet. So what I did was I actually did a lot with the production amounts here and a little bit with the price changes on Taj Mahal. I started out with 3,000 to 3,500 production, and then as I continued on, most of these production drops and stuff are due to not having enough production for Edgar, and I didn't want to raise any of the prices super high in comparison to what they were initially at. And so that's kind of why some of these production values are way different from one another, especially like here in May. My production is super low for Taj, but then I moved on to Alley Cat. I only changed the prices during the summer months to try and decrease demand and just help with not having to produce as much Alley Cat and then also sustain all the rest of the products. But I did spike production during the summer as well, and I got pretty close. I got about 500 beginning inventory cases at the end of the summer, because I tried to keep that about as low as possible. And then I just left the price the same, and I didn't try and lower it to sell them out there, just because I didn't have a super high like ending inventory anyways. And when I put in a lower price to try and sell some of those, it actually dropped my EBT. Then moving on to Munich. With Munich, I just kept low production values and I increased the price to decrease demand because I didn't know much about this, and obviously it's one of the lowest cost to manufacture beers. And so the margins weren't as high, so I decided to minimize my production and my focus on that. And then working into Edgar for here, I just tried to keep my inventory positive and not have any lost sales. And so with that came with a little bit of increased prices. But then as we got into the winter months, I had a lot of extra inventory. And so I decided to lower the prices to try and get rid of some of that. And it didn't fully work out here. I have a lot of ending inventory. But as I tried to lower the prices more and like lower production, it just ended up lowering my EBT, which at the end I got 339,000. So I just decided to leave with what I was at there.
So for my spreadsheet, starting off with Taj Mahal, So I adjusted the price slightly, but I adjusted the price so that way the production would. I wanted the production to be between 2,000 and 4,000 throughout like the whole entire year. So that way I knew I would have enough inventory and not run out, but also I didn't want to have like an overflow of inventory. So that's kind of how I went about Taj Mahal. And then for Alley Cat, I increased the price in the summer and then decreased the price in the winter because obviously it's a summer ale, so we're going to sell more. So I started increasing the price in April. And then I also kind of left the production consistent throughout like the whole year until the winter months because I knew in the winter months we wouldn't sell as much. So I then reduced the amount of production in the winter months. And then for Munich, I didn't really adjust anything again, like both of the other two said. I knew we don't really know much about this ale and how it's gonna function, so I kind of just left it consistent, and that also resulted. I tried to adjust it, like slightly adjusting the price, but that ultimately like lowered my EBT. So I just went back to the original and left it at $13 like throughout the whole entire season. And then for Edgar Ale, I reduced the price towards the end to increase the amount of inventory sold, just so that way I would have not too much like leftover inventory for that ale. And then I also I did the fifth fermenter starting in April, and I left it just as the fifth fermenter all the way through from April to December and didn't bring it back down to four fermenters. And then I ended up with a total EBT of 324,983. So that's kind of how I got to my ending EBT. And then moving on to the like planning sheet that we kind of created for this coming simulation. So obviously we're adding the fifth fermenter through April through December. So that was something to consider. We took the prices from the spreadsheet and we just kind of like left how we had the prices set in the spreadsheets we just kind of transferred that over to the doc. And then we also created the amount of production we want for each ale, like depending on the months. We tried to keep it relatively similar to the last production spreadsheet that we had because we did perform overall we performed pretty well in that simulation. But by adding in the Munich beer, we don't really know much about it. So that one, we were kind of unsure like exactly how much to produce and during like what months. All we know is that it's kind of consistent throughout the year. So we kind of want to make sure that we have like a consistent amount throughout the year. So we kind of like adjusted the numbers based off of that. Obviously, because we're adding the new Munich, we won't really know for sure. Like, so obviously these numbers will probably change, and we'll just have to keep an eye on the lost sales to make sure we're not losing any sales, especially because of adding the new ale into the mix. So yeah.
And
Awesome.
then yeah, so for my role during the simulation, I'm going to be creating production orders and then also kind of managing these loans. And so I gotta get this out of the way. So I'm gonna take out one of these loans here, the lowest percentage here. And then last simulation I messed up and did a $50,000 loan rather than a $30,000 loan. So this time I'll do the 30,000 loan, and then that'll allow us to initially invest in this fifth fermenter and get it as soon as possible.
Yeah, I think we all had it for April.
And the reason for taking out the loan, because technically we don't have to take out a loan for this simulation, but the reason why we want to is just to make sure that we're able to kind of like be like a stable business throughout, and then again like pay off the loan as quickly as possible. Hopefully this time we'll be able to pay it off a little bit sooner than June, just because we don't have as big of a loan. And I also forgot to mention I'll be in charge of, again, the decision making and how much to produce each month of which ale, while also communicating with teammates.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then also initially here, I'm just going to put in our first production order. And so that is 1 Taj Mahal, 1 Munich, and then 2 Edgars. and then that should start us off, and this should give us the best opportunity to grow and improve coming up here on our next simulation. So